Hello and good evening, everybody. My name is Anthony Smyth. Some people might think it's Smith, but there's a Y in there, so it's Anthony Smyth. I'll be talking to you today about some life skills that we like to include in our lessons of the British Council. I'll be talking about these 5 main life skills. We like to have our classes as a positive learning environment where students learn English, but also they gain some skills which will help them in later life. We have 5 core skills that we try to integrate into our lessons: creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, citizenship, and digital literacy. Now I'm going to expand a little bit more on each of those 5. At the end of the presentation, you'll have time to post some questions in the chat. When you post the questions, I'll do my best to answer them. So first of all, let's have a look at creativity. What is it? Well, one of the best ways to develop creativity is to become an expert in a particular area. If you have a good understanding of a particular topic, it means you'll be much better at being able to think about novel or innovative ways of providing solutions to particular problems. It's important that you reward your curiosity and don't get it blocked. When you feel the need to find out more information, when you're curious about something, do give yourself the chance to explore the topics. It's also important to reward yourself as part of the process. Being creative is not just a question of building a tower of blocks and saying voila, but it's the whole process of getting that tower of blocks built. If you're working in the classroom and your teacher asks you to use your vivid imagination, that's the time when you're going to need your sense of creativity. You can see a little challenge there in the bottom, which we'll have a look at in a minute. 10 ways to upcycle a t-shirt. Upcycling is a new word. It means that we reuse things in a very creative way. At the end, you can ask me a couple of other questions about t-shirts if you wish. Now, how can you help yourself develop your creativity? You need to make time for your creativity to develop. Make sure there are no negative attitudes that encroach on you. If you have a wonderful idea and somebody else says it's not such a good idea, don't necessarily believe them. You can't have a fear of failure either. It's always good to try, and we learn from our mistakes, so it's very important that we try whenever we have the opportunity to do so. Sometimes the fear of failure stops people from being truly creative. Whenever you think you've got such kind of feelings, remind yourselves that making mistakes is all part of the learning process. And while you may occasionally make little mistakes, these are not going to be something that is super serious. So it's far better to make some mistakes and learn from them. Now, when we think of 10 ways of upcycling a t-shirt, well, of course, you could make a pillow using the t-shirt. You could make, what else? Oh yes, I know, dog toys. Dogs love to chew on things, so you can easily cut up your t-shirt and make it into a lovely little stuffed toy for a dog to use. Also, I see in the shops people buying rags to clean things. You don't need to buy rags and cloths for cleaning things. Just reuse one of your t-shirts. Now let's look at collaboration. Collaboration is simply working together with other people. What do you do when you're stumped? When you've got no idea what you need to do? Well, this is where you need to use other people to help. You need to make sure that you bring some ideas to the table to help other people. And in turn, you have to be very able to listen to other ideas from other people. On a wider note, collaboration brings people of all different cultures together. If you were to go to an international exchange, this is one of the places where you would work on projects together. Obviously, English is important as an international language of communication, but also your own personality, your own attitude is very important when you're working with other people. Collaboration helps people learn from each other. One of the best things about working collaboratively is it brings different skill sets to the table. People from different countries, from different cultures, will very often have quite a different way of looking at problems than you do. This is, of course, not a bad thing. This is a good thing. And it's all about being creative in such a collaborative way. It also opens up new channels of communication. Very often, if you're working in business, you have to work on projects with colleagues. Now, these may be colleagues you get on with, but they may well be colleagues that you don't get on with. However, this is where you need to put your personal feelings aside and work constructively with the other people. Creating a cohesive, open workplace is something that will benefit everybody. On top of that, it brings everyone a little closer to each other, and we can all learn so much from other people's input. Collaboration boosts morale across the coordinations and companies. So when people know that they're working together, they feel that bond, they feel that team-working effort. So it's very important when you're working on any project collaboratively that you don't bring any negativity to the table. It's important to improve the morale of teams by being positive, creative, and very open to all the sort of ideas that other people do. If you are working in a company, you'll be working with other people. And as I said before, it's vital that you put personal differences aside and focus entirely on the project. Collaboration also makes us much more efficient as workers. When you go for job interviews, they ask about your team working skills. How good are you as a team player? Well, this is something that you can practice whenever you are working on any projects together. So if you're doing classwork, for example, which we very often give our students, instead of doing it in the class, we ask the students to communicate with each other and do it outside at home. Obviously, during the last year, this has all been done online, but we've had some fantastic results from our collaborative projects done by our students. They managed to deal with all the technical issues connected with it and came out with some excellent results. So all in all, when we talk about collaboration, creating a collaborative workplace takes time and effort, but it's very much well worth it in the end. You yourself will feel far better having spent an hour, a day, even a couple of weeks working with a team when you all know that you've done your part to make sure everything went successfully. Now, critical thinking. Well, critical thinking is basically 7 steps that I've outlined here. The world today is full of problems, and the problems are always changing. Many years ago, when I was your age, we had a completely different set of problems, and not one of them was related to technology. Nowadays, we use in a very technological world. So all these things we'll be looking at later in digital literacy. But for a moment, let's just focus on our critical thinking. It's a skill that allows you to make logical and informed decisions to the best of your ability. So children are still able to be critical thinkers. They have to base their decisions on the knowledge they have at the moment. A critical thinker is quick to conclude whether something is possible or not. There are always limitations, and we are empowered to analyze them correctly and decide whether we can do something or not. Let's look again at these 7 steps. Identify a problem or issue. It's very important that you are quite quick to look at the bottom line of a problem. Too many times people will talk and talk and talk about the problem without getting to the core issue. You have to look for the most important thing that needs dealing with and set about dealing that. Identify why the problem exists and how it can be solved. This is something that might not be an area which you are competent at, but of course Google can help. But before you go to Google, do ask other people in your team. Do ask other members for their information and ideas. Collecting information on the issue through research is very important. If you are in a meeting and you discovered or identified a particular problem, then you can go away individually, collect as much information and data on this problem as you can. Then you can get back together, organize the data and your results according to a set of criteria that you have. And in this way, you'll narrow down potential solutions. In a nutshell, the simpler the problem, the simpler the solution. So if you have a very difficult problem, you have to get down to the bottom line, to the main thing that needs to be done first. This will help you organize some steps in developing solutions to carry out the problem. It's important that people talk together and share their information, because if anybody holds back, then that could in itself create a brand new problem. Solutions are not always just black and white, and it's not something that, oh, we've done it, we can forget about it. It's always a good idea to rethink solutions. Think if there's a better way of doing something. It's equally important and arguably more difficult to learn how to set aside your own bias when you're thinking about solutions to problems. You, of course, have your opinions, and your colleagues, your friends, your classmates, they have their opinions. But as we mentioned earlier on in collaboration, it's very important that you are able to put your personal feelings aside and be very objective as you think about the particular problems on hand. It's always important to analyze which solutions worked and which didn't. You can then think a little bit more carefully about problems you had while you were trying to work on the problem. This is not creating more work for yourself. This is just a way of making the future a little bit simpler. So if you're working on a problem and you come up with some solutions, there might be a little bit of disagreement in the team as to which solution is better. Eventually, you'll decide which one. Now, if that proves not to be the best option, when you are doing your analysis, then you will see which solution could have worked well. And it gives you time to identify ways to improve your chosen solution. Nowadays, one of the biggest problems we get from teachers and from parents is that school children keep accessing their mobile phones during lessons. Now, if this is a problem, we need to think of some solutions. So later on at the end of the presentation in the chat, you can pose a couple of questions or possible solutions for this. As a teacher, I would be very happy to welcome some of your suggestions because I myself have dealt with this problem in the past with some of my students. The next skill we talk about is citizenship. Now, when we talk about citizenship, people often think that's some kind of clever word for being a good citizen. Well, it's a little bit more than that. It's about helping people. Now, who is it important for? Well, if we look at this little pie chart, helping at home, that's something I certainly do the most. Helping at school, a little bit less, but almost quarter. Helping a stranger in need. Well, over the last year, I haven't travelled around very much at all because of the COVID situation, but I have on occasion helped complete strangers, old ladies with their shopping bags, blind people who are trying to cross the road, and even a car driver who'd broken down. I could have driven past, but I stopped, asked him if anything I could do to help. Unfortunately, I always have some tools in the car, so I helped him repair the problem and off we went. Also, helping people with disabilities. Nowadays, if you go around with somebody in a wheelchair, you'll soon notice that there are many, many places where wheelchairs are really a big problem. You cannot get upstairs, you cannot go down steps. So it's important that you think about how you can help people in such situations. At the end, I'd like you to think a little bit about your own pie chart. Would it look like mine, or would the areas be slightly different? If helping someone with a disability is a small section like mine, then maybe, like me, you should think a bit more about other ways of being an active citizen and helping people with disabilities. There are many things that you can do. For example, in Liverpool, active citizens, they've supplied bicycles donated by local communities to the National Health staff and key workers, so they can travel quite easily to and from work without using cars and public transport. These were bicycles that belonged to the children, but they were perfectly accepted by the health workers who didn't want to sit in traffic jams. We all know, certainly here in Krakow, the colossal traffic jams we have. In Brazil, an active citizen from an indigenous community was working to protect the lands, the farmlands, which were affected by mining practices. Big coal mine had opened up near them, so they decided to share technology and knowledge that they had about the agricultural planting, beekeeping and compositing and seed information. These were university students who felt that the company itself hadn't really done a good job. Closer to home, there were two people who set up and formed a friendship all about improving the lives of people with disabilities, particularly in Poland. Now, the lady Majka Lipiak and Artur Szaflik, they created a company called Leżą i Pracują. Now, this is something that you might think should have been done a long time ago, but it hasn't been done before. So it's important that, like them, you think about how you can help people. When they met, they both were instantly clicked over a passion for social action, and they began to think of ways of helping people who had disabilities. Their first step was to transform Arthur's bedroom into an office so that he could actually use his intelligence and work from his own bed. Using leadership skills gained through her activity during the training of this active citizens, Micah was able to bring 30 volunteers to help them. And then they later on worked together, forming this company, Leżą i Pracuję. and it was the world's first marketing agency dedicated to providing jobs for paralyzed people or people with disabilities. So this is the key thing about being a good citizen. You need to have a social action, social conscience, wanting to do some projects to help people, not just the elderly, but as we know, people who are disabled as well. These are good projects to work on because they bring people together. Organisations and networks improve the well-being of others. We can't just rely on the local council or the government to take action. You, the individual, can get together with groups of friends, and as a large group, you could certainly do something very useful. You can raise awareness of particular situations. Anybody whose rights have been challenged or infringed, then as a group, you have a louder voice than working as individuals. You also can help breathe life into your local community by working together in various areas where the local councils haven't done anything. So as you walk around your city, if you see something and you think, well, yes, that could be changed, don't just think that could be changed. Take some action. Do something about it. Remember, think about your own pie chart and how you will change that. The last thing we're going to look at is digital literacy. As I mentioned earlier, when I was your age, this didn't exist. So this is all brand new, even for me. Digital literacy is about these key main points. Staying safe in a digital environment. We've seen people who have set up their own websites, and they started to include very personal information. Now, this is not a good idea because this is the sort of thing that can get targeted by other people. So you need to think very carefully about what becomes public. What does the term digital literacy mean to you? Well, although the meaning can be varied according to various sources, we can just give it our own definition. I think it's the ability to use information and communication technologies to find, evaluate, create, and communicate information. It requires both cognitive and technical skills. With this digital literary definition as a guiding light, it's important to understand that even digital natives who know how to send a text or post on social media are not necessarily considered digitally literate by any means. Digital literacy is an education which encompasses so much more. For example, students need to have a specific skill set when reading online texts that may contain, for example, embedded sources such as hyperlinks, audio links, graphs, or charts that require you to make choices. Students today are also being asked to create, collaborate, and share digital content, and to do so responsibly. For these reasons, principals, school librarians, and teachers understand the importance of digital literacy as a new skill and teaching it in the classroom. Why is reading online not digital literacy? Well, students need to use both cognitive and technical skills to find, evaluate, create, communicate information, certainly on their way of becoming digital literate, savvy customers in our digital age. However, it's important to note that simply reading online or subscribing to an ebook service does not mean you are a digitally literate student. Why is digital literacy so important? It's certainly a funny phrase to pronounce. School leaders and media specialists focus on the benefits of this in schools because today's students need to be incredibly competent when it comes to using the internet as a source of information. In the beginning, people just believed what they saw on the internet. Nowadays, most people are far more aware of let's say you need to double check your facts before. Many people in the beginning thought Wikipedia, well, that's like an encyclopedia. It must be true. But no, this is where you need to do some extra research and fact checking. Students who are building digital literacy skills understand this basic of internet safety. Strong passwords, for example, are a good example. People who have passwords which are their pets, their parents' names, their siblings' names, these are passwords which are easy to crack. You need to be aware of all the privacy settings that are possible. Nowadays, most young people don't use Facebook anymore. But if you are on Twitter, Snapchat, or TikTok, you certainly need to be fully aware of all the safety features you can use. And you need to be able to stop yourself from making any adverse comments. Nowadays, cyberbullying has become far more predominant than physical bullying. Certainly over the last year, when everybody's been stuck at home in their rooms, going completely mad, it's so easy to read something online and just make a negative comment. The people can't see you, so it's a bit of a cowardly way of trying to make a point. People who have high digital literary skills, they understand the perils of cyberbullying and they do their utmost to stop any occurrences that they see, and they're also fully supportive of their family and friends if such problems happen to them. Overall then, there are 4 principles of digital literacy. Number 1, comprehension, being able to understand the new world that you live in, to understand the implicit and explicit ideas from any media you contact with, reading between the lines, not taking things as face value. Number 2, interdependence. Interdependence is how one media form connects with another, whether potentially, metaphorically, ideally, or literally. Little media is created with the purpose of isolation, and publishing is easier than ever before. Due to the sheer abundance of media, it's necessary that media forms not simply coexist, but they work together. Social factors is number 3. Sharing is no longer just a message or method of personal identity and distribution, but it's rather a way of creating positive messages. There is so much negativity out there in the world that we don't need to contribute to it at all. So we need to focus on having a very positive outlook and contributing very positively on any media that we use. Number 4, the last one, curation. This is the process of selecting and organizing and looking after data. If you just save everything, after about 5 years, you'll have so much saved that it'll just be extra baggage that you can't even deal with. Instead of this digital hoarding, which is just keeping files and files and folders, you need to be quite critical in what you select and what you delete. It's very important to make sure that your own computer is not just full of rubbish. Now, thank you for your attention. Registering for our courses has been made very easy for you. If you go to www.britishcouncil.pl/angielski, you can book a consultation and complete an online level check. After the online level check, you would have a chat with a teacher like myself, and we would be able to find out why you'd like to learn English, what sort of courses interest you most, and help you find the right choice. After your consultation, you can register for your chosen course with the help of our customer services. There is also a competition. But if you want to find out more about the competition, please go to www.britishcouncil.pl/angielski. Now that's the end of the presentation. So if anybody would like to pose a question, please do so in the chat and I'll do my utmost to answer. Renata has asked, how can I learn to be more creative? Well, the way you do this is by not letting yourself be restricted by anything that restricts you. Go back to the t-shirt. Think about 10 ways of reusing, upcycling a t-shirt. Oh dear, I can only think of one. Well, that's because your imagination has been closed off. If you look at life hacks on YouTube, you will see many wonderful ways of upcycling and reusing just about anything. Now, if you haven't got a very creative mind, just watching people doing wonderful things with plastic bottles, t-shirts, rubber bands, old tins, old cans, this will just help you yourself become more creative. Certainly when you have to do any writing task, the task itself requires you to come up with a lot of information. So this is where you have to use your own imagination and not feel at all restricted. Alex has asked, what can I do to get the next advanced level of English? Well, input is the key. I'm speaking quite good English, but then that's because I've been reading English and listening English for many, many years. Reading English and listening to English is the best way of moving yourself up from a B2 to a C1 level. You also need to find your own learning style. Myself, I much prefer to write down notes, even color coding them. Whereas my daughter, she's completely auditory. She needs to listen to things. She hardly ever writes things down, but she just remembers everything by listening. So the more you read, the more you listen in English, the better your writing and speaking skills will become. So Jacek has a question. Are there any activities teenagers could do together instead of sitting at the table? Well, certainly in the classroom, we have to sit around the tables, which is not something that we want to do. At the British Council Krakow and also in Warsaw, we're fortunate that we are quite close to a large area of the city. So what we often do in our classes is get students to create surveys. And once they've created the survey, which could be like 10 questions, we send them out into the street to talk to people. And we get them to focus on the foreigners, not Polish people. So as they walk around, as soon as they see a tourist, they go up to them. Hello, good afternoon. May I ask you a few questions? And even the person who is not English, usually they have enough English for them to be able to carry out the survey. So that's one idea. The other way is getting students to communicate through their own phones. We use mobile phones in the classroom because that's the best way to get the online dictionary. But also texting each other is something people do. So you can work on projects by yourself, together or at home, and come up with results and feedback later on to class. Tomorrow there's going to be a nice session on playing games, because obviously in our classroom we need to have fun and laughter. Not that this is a negative, we take it as a positive, because people who are in a good frame of mind learn far better. So tomorrow there will be a session on playing games in the classroom, educational games of course. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to do the presentation, and I hope you certainly learned something from it. One more quick question from Renata. What materials do I use in class? Well, for me, the best materials are sheets of paper and pens and pencils. Nowadays, everybody is swamped with technology. So when I have people in my classroom, I try to get away from that and get them using their creativity, working together, but only with pens, pencils, and paper. So, for example, if we are doing a problem-solving activity, you yourself, Renata, will write down a particular problem you've encountered last week. You'll give your piece of paper to one of the other students, and they read what you've written, and then they have to write down a solution. They then pass that piece of paper to another student. They read your problem, the first solution, but then they themselves had to have a second solution. At the end of this process, you get the piece of paper back and you have time to read 3 or 4 solutions to the problem you had. And then in the class, we can discuss the problems that were mentioned and how these solutions worked and whether we could improve on any of them. But as I said before, it's purely paper, pencils and pens.